As anyone who has spent any amount of time watching them will know, faith-based films are hit and miss. When you wade into one, you really have no idea what you're going to get. Some are truly excellent examples of high-level filmmaking, while others deserve, at best, a golf clap for effort. And so when I first heard about Jesus Revolution and watched the trailer, I was hopeful and yet guarded myself against grave disappointment. Released in the United States on February 24th, 2023, Jesus Revolution is co-directed by two men. The first is John Irwin, who is one half of the Irwin Brothers, a filmmaking team that was responsible for such films as I Can Only Imagine and American Underdog. And the second is Brent McCorkle, who I have to say I had never heard of before. I had to look him up, and it looks like the only other feature film he's directed is a 2012 movie called Unconditional. I guess if you've seen that movie, chime in the comments and let us know how it is. I hopped over to Rotten Tomatoes, and it seems that it was actually reviewed quite well. I actually tried to find it, but as far as I can tell, you can get it on DVD, but it's not available to stream anywhere, even as a rental. But back to the movie we're reviewing, distributed by Lionsgate. Jesus Revolution was made on a budget of just $15 million and has gone on to gross $52 million worldwide. Even though that total is not exactly Passion of the Christ numbers, having made back more than 3 times its production budget, and now going on to make more money on streaming and DVD and Blu-ray, the film is definitely a hit, and I'm sure that the studio is happy. Jesus Revolution is focused on the Jesus movement of the late 60s and early 70s, in which the hippie culture of the era had a run-in with Christianity, and the result was large swaths of young people coming to faith in Christ and producing what could perhaps be called countercultural expressions of the Christian faith. While orthodox in doctrine, the visible form of the Christian communities and worship that sprung out of the Jesus movement were marked with the distinction of their own era. The film primarily focuses on 3 characters, all real-life people. The first is Lonnie Frisbee, who is played by Jonathan Roumie, who right now is super popular because he plays Jesus on The Chosen. Frisbee was a charismatic hippie minister in California who came to faith after some acid-fueled visions that he had while reading the Bible. And by the time we catch up with him in the movie, he has left the drugs behind and is traveling about California trying to spread the good news. Frisbee is then connected with Chuck Smith, who is played by Kelsey Grammer in the film, and who pastors a small church with an aging congregation that is very much set in its ways. At the beginning of the film, Smith was not at all sure what to think of the hippies, but when he meets Lonnie, he is won over pretty quickly, and despite some resistance from existing members of the congregation, the hippies are invited into the church, and this sets off a chain of events that results in a movement that grows and grows and spreads, not just through California, but throughout much of the United States. Now, when I saw the trailers, I originally thought that Lonnie Frisbee would be the main character in the movie, but this is not true. The real central character is not Lonnie, it's not Chuck Smith, it's actually Greg Laurie, who is played in the film by Joel Courtney. If you don't know who Greg Laurie is, he is the pastor of Harvest Christian Fellowship in California. He also leads Harvest Crusades, which puts on these big evangelistic conferences which attract thousands and thousands of people, and that are somewhat reminiscent of the huge events that Billy Graham would do decades ago when his career was at its zenith. But before Greg Laurie would go on to do all of that, he was just a young guy in California trying to figure his life out, and that is where we meet him in the film. And yes, while broadly the film is about the Jesus movement, and it's about the work that Lonnie Frisbee and Chuck Smith would do together, the anchor to the storyline is really Greg Laurie's journey from a young guy on a truth quest to his conversion to Christianity, and ultimately to the beginnings of his career as a pastor. And along the way, we also explore his relationship with his mother, who has some substance abuse issues and also issues with broken relationships with men, and also his budding romance with Kathy Martin, who is played in the film by Anna Grace Barlow. I felt like across the board, the acting was excellent. I think it's clear that the heavyweight here is Kelsey Grammer. You can just tell that he is the veteran and he is bringing that experience to the role. But Jonathan Roumie also does a great job of bringing Lonnie to life, although I have to say that I don't think I like his performance quite as much here as I do in The Chosen. There just seems to be a maturity to his performance in The Chosen that I'm not quite sure is manifested here, but it's still good. Joel Courtney, I think, is great as Greg Laurie. It's a very believable performance, and he plays the character in a way that makes him easy to relate to as he makes his journey through the story. Perhaps the biggest surprise for me, though, was Anna Grace Barlow as Kathy. I actually did not know this actress until this film, but I thought she was wonderful. She gives a totally natural performance where I never questioned it, and I just accepted that, yes, this is a teenage girl in the 1970s. She's a little rebellious, and like Greg, she's on her life's journey, searching for meaning and purpose. Another thing I'd like to call attention to is the cinematography. A lot of films that are made today, but that are set in the 60s or 70s, really end up looking like modern films that just happen to have props and costumes from a previous era. But in Jesus Revolution, the cinematography and color grade render images that evoke a sense of the actual film stock of the era in which the story takes place. Considering that this is an area in which a lot of modern films stumble, especially lower budgeted modern films, I thought the look and feel of the movie was surprisingly effective. Lastly, I will say that theologically, I had no issues with the film. As is appropriate for the subject matter, being that it is a film focused on Greg Laurie and Chuck Smith and Lonnie Frisbee, when the film does get theological, what it conveys is pretty much down the middle evangelical Christian theology. If I did have one complaint, it's that at no point is the gospel clearly elucidated. And by that I mean there is no single point in the film where the full spread of the gospel is laid out. There is one moment at the time of Greg's baptism where just before being baptized he's led through a sinner's prayer, and I did find that to be quite sufficient. But I think it would have been good at least once in the film to very clearly and effectively lay out the gospel message so that viewers who may not be believers or may not even know that much about Christianity can understand exactly what it is that Christianity has to say about man's condition and why Christ is the remedy. Overall, however, I thought the film was quite good. It provides an interesting look at men and events that are significant to the history of the faith, and it does it well. In terms of the quality of the film and the competence of the craftsmen who made it, this is a movie that can stand with any other production. That is, it's a good movie. It's not just good for a Christian movie. So, if you're sitting there and thinking about some of the other quote-unquote Christian films that you've seen and how they weren't actually very good, and don't let that turn you off of checking this one out. While I can't say that it's the best film that I've ever seen that deals with Christian people and themes, it's certainly one of the better ones, and I'm happy to recommend it. All right, guys, that's it for this video, and I hope that you found this interesting and helpful as always. If you haven't done so, please click subscribe, like, leave a comment, do all the good things, and I will talk to you later.